Good morning and welcome to Great Tree Zen Women's Temple's Saturday morning talks. This morning, our speaker is the Reverend Eido Phoebe Reinhart. And Tejo, would you please do the opening sutra?
Unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to, remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's teaching.
And now a brief statement about Dharma. In Buddhism, when Zen practitioners share their understanding of the teachings and practice, it is offered freely as a practice of dana paramita. Dana is a Pali word that means generosity or to give freely, and this practice is done without expectation of getting something in return. This is the spirit about speaking the Dharma. Other ways to practice dana is to offer support to those who share the teachings, to support places of spiritual practice, and to give without judgment or expectation when opportunities arise. Those who share the teachings at Great Tree do so on a dana basis. Please support their practice by giving what you can. And Phoebe, what do you have? What would you like to do with dana?
It can be directed to Great Tree.
All right, thank you. If you'd like to support Great Tree, go to greattree.org and follow the donation path.
GreatTreeTemple.org.
GreatTreeTemple.org. I knew there was something missing. Eido Phoebe Reinhart was ordained by and received transmission from Reverend Shoaku Okamura. She participated in 2 3-month Anji in Japan, 2012 and 2016, and is recognized by Sotosu as Kokushiya Fujiyoshi, missionary teacher. She recently retired in 2020 and working as a physical therapist for 59 years. She resides in Minneapolis, has 2 sons and daughters-in-law, and 2 grandchildren, 2 and 4 years old. Welcome.
Thank you. Actually, it was 50 years, which was plenty, not 59, but I probably, that was probably a typo. So Tejo asked me to talk give my perspective about the Jukai-e that we participated in November 2022. First, I want to confess that in my mental calendar that I had this on for July. So anyway, so this will be kind of spontaneous. And just to back up a little bit, I just wanted to say regarding my relationship with Tejo, she remembers meeting me at a Hokyoji retreat many years ago. But some people, anyway, but I met her earlier than that, and she doesn't, and that was because I lived in Juneau, Alaska from 1985 to 1992. And during that time, I would come to Minnesota once a year to see my family and to go to a weekend session at MZMC. So but people didn't know me. I just got to know them by their names on a list. And I remember Tejo as that hippie girl with the long hair, Roberta. Anyway, so that was probably 1986. So I'd like to, before I get into my perspective about the Jukai-e, well, first of all, I was on the verge of talking to Tejo about, I'm not sure I have anything to say about this. And some of what I have to say is kind of mixed feelings about it, but it prompted some good questions. And I'm going to ask probably you to respond to these questions too. And one of the main ones is, what is the point of all this form and theatrics, you might say? in these ceremonies. But first of all, let me just say a little bit more about my background that can kind of explain how I got here. And that is, I was brought up as a Presbyterian, and the Presbyterians are very verbose in their prayers. You know, they would go on for quite a long time. And at quite an early age, I felt the need for some quiet. And I don't know how I would have explained it at the time, but in retrospect, it was kind of like somehow I understood that I shouldn't just be talking to God, but I should be listening. And how do I listen if I'm not quiet? Because as a teenager, I used to stop by the local Catholic church sometimes because it was always open in those days. You could come in anytime and pray, and people would just leave you alone and assume that you were doing what you were supposed to be doing there, which was praying. And in this case, it meant, for me, just sitting quietly. So I was kind of drawn to that kind of maybe contemplative kind of mode early on. And then, like many people, I sort of rejected Christianity because what I had experienced of Christianity, it didn't work for me. It didn't fit. And therefore, actually, I rejected it, but I experienced it as being rejected by Christianity. Like, I don't belong there. Where do I belong? And I didn't know where to explore at that time except through the Christian tradition. So I became very interested in Catholicism and the monastic tradition and the tradition of contemplative prayer. And eventually, actually, I went to a Catholic monastery for a year. So I was very also drawn by sort of the ritual and the sort of the embodiment that Catholics did, you know, at their spiritual practice. In my growing up, it was mostly a verbal thing, and so to see people actually kneeling and being quiet and praying and doing all this sort of it included their body, I guess is what I was saying. It included their body in a way that attracted me. And so I became a Catholic. And then, but along the way, I was still searching for how to pray and how to be internally quiet, which seemed to require being physically still. And I was very fidgety. And so I met a friend who was practicing Zen, and he told me about Zen. And I said, wow, okay. So I tried that for my prayer, and I thought, wow, this seems really right. I could kind of settle down, even though I could only do it for maybe 10 minutes. So I adopted that posture as my prayer posture, and my prayer was kind of a receptive, just kind of being receptive. And I might have used the word surrender. At that time, I would use the word surrender to God's will, or letting my will being replaced by God's will. And so I was thought in very Christian terms. And when I went to the monastery, I was already practicing this daily on my own, and I did in the monastery also. And before I went to Minnesota Zen Meditation Center and talked to Katagiri about my vocation, that I was going to the monastery, but I was practicing Zen and I really needed some instruction and some experience. Could I participate in a session? And he said yes. And I think the next one was 5 to 7 days, I can't remember. And I had only been sitting for maybe at 20 minutes at the most at that time. But anyway, I figured it was very precious because I was going away to the monastery for the rest of my life. And this was my only chance to actually practice with a teacher. So, and it had very profound effect on me. And eventually I ended up practicing for many years I was practicing Catholicism, and Zen. I'd go to the Zen Center on Saturday, and I'd go to the church on Sunday, and then they changed the Sunday at Zen Center to Saturday, so I had to rearrange my Christian schedule, and this went on for quite a long time until eventually there was more Zen than there was the Christianity, but I never rejected that. I have a more universal view about all of this. It wasn't like this or this. And, but the point of my telling this story is just to, that I was kind of naturally drawn to this embodiment and this practice. Maybe not everybody is, but probably to some extent, if you're practicing, there's a reason for it. And the practice itself kind of reinforces that reason. And so I eventually, I was in Alaska for 7 years, and there was no Zen going on there. So I would come here once a year. And then Katagiri died while I was up there. And he was never officially my teacher. But when I came back, Shohaku Okamura was an interim teacher at MZMC. And that's when so this was early 90s. That's when I really started practicing with a Sangha and not just on my own, and eventually ordained with him. So initially, I was very enthusiastic, like many converts are, about many things, including the forms, the bowing and the prostration. Now, some people had an aversion to that, but I never did. I felt very comfortable. This is exactly what I need to do. And so I was kind of a high church kind of person in terms of like the ceremonies and things, some things that would be put other people would feel uncomfortable with. I was like all for, the more ceremonies, the better. And eventually I got over that a little bit, so that now by this time, frankly, I could take it or leave it to some extent. It's like I can enter into it, but I don't need it. And so I thought, do I have anything to say about these ceremonies that we participated in? Well, yes, I do. Mostly questions, but I found that by being able to sort of take it or leave it, that doesn't mean I dismiss it, nor does it mean that it's necessary. It means that I can enter into it wholeheartedly, but it's not necessary for my practice. And so, and I can understand people who cannot enter into it. But I think the challenge is Westerners sometimes have a hard time appreciating that embodiment that Soto Zen has in its history, and I didn't, but what I was so just a couple examples of when I was in Japan. We would have a lot of ceremonies, and sometimes we didn't even know what they were for or what they were about. One day it was about giving homage to the local deity, and that sounded pretty primitive to me. And also, who are these local deity? Why am I giving them homage? And the abbess of our practice period just said, "Oh, you Westerners, you always have to know why." She said, "Just do it." And I think Katagiri said that sometimes too, and people will be questioning, why are we bowing? Why are we doing this? Well, just do it. And there's something about just doing it without all this examination of, all the details, intellectual details of what it means and why and this and that. Those things can actually kind of get in the way. And so if a person can just do it, you can be there 100%, even actually, regardless of what's in your mind. You've probably heard that statement, like, don't believe what your mind says. I mean, sometimes we can't trust that. So these 5 days of ceremonies, Heijo and I were in the Ryoban, which means we were in the lineup in front of the altar. And this was for 4 or 5 ceremonies a day. And so it was quite tiring and actually a little hard on my body. Because I'm 76 and I get back pain and knee pain. And so there's, just to give an example, you know, there was a ceremony for welcoming the candidates who were there for Jukai, and there was a ceremony for honoring their preceptors, and there was a ceremony for honoring the Buddhas, and there was a ceremony for honoring all the ancestors, and so there was lots of bowing, and lots of chanting, and the thing, one of the things that I've experienced about chanting is that that's another area where we have a couple chants that you know, that actually have no understandable words, and we chant them. And so what are we doing when we chant a Dharani, for instance, that has words that we don't actually understand? That's hard for Westerners. They want a translation, but there's something about the power. In fact, in some ways it can be more powerful, not understanding and just experiencing the sound and the vibration and the experience of many people giving themselves wholeheartedly to this chant. It's these physical things that we do have a profound effect on us, sort of whether we understand or not. And so one of the things I kind of learned is sort of to enter into it with an open heart and leave the understanding for later. And just let it be. We might say, let go of our feelings about it, but another letting go is kind of like just letting it be. It's okay if I have feelings about it. That doesn't need to control me. I can still enter into it wholeheartedly. And then the question is, well, why? Why do we do this? Well, for me, part of it is just wanting to be connected with the hundreds and thousands of years of tradition, and being connected with the ancestors by chanting to them, bowing, prostrations, and also there's kind of a universal, although these ceremonies are not spontaneous, we had to practice for all of them, but still there's, you know, kind of common themes on how they go. And you can go to any Soto temple in the world and it will be very similar. And so there's kind of also just kind of a feeling of interconnectedness with the rest of the Soto practitioners in the world. In this country, we have a kind of a range of feelings or opinions about these forms. So now, for instance, locally, we have a group that has eliminated all Zen forms and they're just sitting. And this is partly what attracted me to Shohaku Okumura, is that his practice is kind of simplified, stripped down, doesn't have they don't do a lot of chanting. But the basic form is still there, and what that it shows to me is I would just sometimes the word is used, dignified bearing, maintaining dignified bearing in our and sometimes you can see a teacher and you can sort of see that and you can feel that. And sometimes that is even what attracts people to a practice. They see this person, oh, there's something about this person. And I want to find out what it is. And so Shohaku Okumura does have that very dignified bearing. He, anyway, in their liturgy, it's very simple, but they always have the prostrations when you come into the space. And so there's kind of I would say, a reverence or respect for the practice and the space and the ancestors that's manifested in these forms. And when I was at MZM, Minnesota Zen Meditation Center, they decided that they wanted to eliminate a lot of that to make it more comfortable for everyone, so no one would feel uncomfortable, which meant that we were asked to consider not doing a gasho even when we entered the space. And for me, that was very jarring. I had kind of a bottom line beyond which I couldn't go. Like, so my little saying at that time was, well, you can take the bow out of the Zendo, but you can't take it out of me. I just can't help it. I have to bow. And I'm not talking about prostration. I'm just talking about this. So there was a minimal amount that it felt was needed to manifest some reverence and respect for this space and this practice. I went to one of these retreats locally with just sitting, which was not Zen, and I really liked the quiet. Shohaku has a lot of quiet too. I liked that, but I found that so there were kind of an unwritten rule of no bowing, and I came into the Zendo and there wasn't a candle burning. I mean, and people were walking this way and that way. And these people had been practicing for decades and they knew how to enter and exit a Zendo. And I was like an OCD person. Like I couldn't stand this chaos of people just coming in any which way, in any which order and crossing diagonally. And it was amazing how this practice makes you see yourself and your feelings about things, like I was like, wow, what's that about? Well, it was, I accepted it, but it was jarring every time. And it was jarring because part of the point of having, there's some practical reasons for having some form. And one of them, you don't have to think or make decisions about going left or right because it's already prescribed and that kind of frees you. So if you come into the Zendo and every time you come in, you have to figure out, am I going left or right? Am I going over there? Or am I passing this person? It's kind of like stirring things up a little bit. And the same with oryoki or any kind of ritual, it can be challenging at first, but once you get it down, it's like it allows you to just do it without, you don't have to make, that's the whole thing about practice and sesshin. You don't have to make decisions. You just follow the form. And form in that way is very helpful. It's practical. And also it helps us to experience our interconnectedness by practicing harmony in our movements. And so if we're moving more like a collective body instead of 10 individuals, it feels to me more calming, more settling, more harmonious, more connected. I feel like I'm more connected actually to the people. And when I used to come to Minnesota Zen Meditation Center once a year for sesshin, I never knew the people who were there and I didn't need to. For me, it was, I knew people as well as you can being silent for days, sitting on a cushion. And to me, that was quite intimate. I didn't need to know who did what for a living or any of these details. I felt like I knew people just by being there with them. And I think that could be quite profound, and form can also give us that kind of freedom is also a connectedness. And so these fancy ceremonies that we went to or that we participated in have that can have a powerful effect, sort of, if we just let them be and not judge about whether we like this, whether we don't like that, what this means, what that means. Just do it. And after you've done it for a couple of days, you get into kind of a rhythm, kind of like sesshin. We know what we're doing, and we are embodying the practice in our physical stature, in our movement, and it's choreographed, so it's kind of like a dance in a way. And but that also means working harmoniously together to make our group as one. And that's a very beautiful and I think very spiritual experience. And so my kind of message, I guess, would be to, if there is one, is that to encourage people to consider that, especially if you're having misgivings about some forms that your group practices. And maybe you're already way beyond that because you're used to what you're doing, but and I don't even know what you're doing in terms of form, but there usually there's some kind of form. And I noticed that Tejo, bowed and gave an offering at the altar before this, and that's part of your form. And to think about what it would be like if you didn't have that structure. What if you just all came wandering in and sat down any place, anytime, anyway, and there was no container, you might say, for the practice that you're doing. And I feel like I anyway am grateful for the many generations of Soto Zen practitioners who have brought us this tradition, regardless of how much we take of it or practice it. And you are very fortunate there to have Tejo as your teacher, because for many reasons, but including she is connected with Soto Shu, which a lot of people don't realize that's kind of rare, actually. There aren't a lot of people, priests in this country who are officially connected with Soto Shu. And that is a wonderful connection to have, and something to be grateful for. And one of the things when I was there, our groups were kind of separated. There are the people who were doing the ceremonies, and then there were the people who were receiving the precepts, who spent many hours sitting in pews. And I did think some about our experience, like my experience was standing and bowing a lot. Their experience was sitting a lot. And I haven't heard much feedback about how people experienced that, except I think I did hear one of your people talk about his experience. And I can't remember the details, but it sounded like it was mostly positive. The other thing about this particular event is that the people who planned this for years, and the amount of effort and detail that they went into to plan all this and choreograph this was quite impressive. I mean, this little book, this book is just for the Ryoban, our instructions. And then there was a big manual that had 75 pages in it. And so one of the things I experience when I go to these things is gratitude for what they're offering us, and giving us the opportunity to participate more deeply in their tradition that we aren't actually all that familiar with, unless we have an opportunity to practice with the Japanese people. And they are very generous and very patient, and there is a strong sense of Sangha, like international Sangha, which I appreciate. And so I'm interested in other people. I see we don't have many people, but interested in other people's feeling or about forms and practices, whether that's something that's meaningful to you. Do you see some value in it? Do you think it's superfluous? What is it for you? Anybody want to comment on that, including Tejo?
Of course, I have a lot to say, but I'm going to let other people speak first.
I don't know if there are other people who are going to speak.
Sometimes Lorna and Kalyan have things to say. I think it's the time of year, but this is getting recorded. But so even though there aren't so many people here, we still have it in our YouTube library. No, you know, I related a lot of what you said. When I was a child, as you know, I was raised as a Catholic and went to Catholic schools all my life. And I absolutely loved forms and ceremonies. And I, you know, to the point where I would judge people, you know, if they weren't doing it right or something, you know, in my head, because I knew every detail of every ceremony. And that really bled over to my Zen life, you know. And I mean, when Tim Burkett was first ordained, he was one of the first people ordained. I mean, it was 3 or 4 years before I was ordained. And he used to ask me what to do during ceremonies because I knew every detail of it, you know. So then I went to Japan and I was making books about all the details of all of them, you know, like what we've got. And even in Japan, I was doing that and just memorize every detail. But when I came back, I didn't want to have anything to do with ceremonies anymore. And when I moved to North Carolina, I thought, well, you know what? I got into this because of Zazen, so that's all we have to do. But what happened is that people started saying, well, you know, we need some order for walking out of here or coming in or, you know. And then at a certain point, I felt like this group was ready to take the next step. And I thought, oh, the precepts, you know. And so that has a lot of form. And then somebody in the group went out to Zen Center of Los Angeles and came back and said, oh, I want to do these chanting and what our group. And so I said, okay, if we're going to do it though, we're going to do it right. We're going to do it good. And I sort of gradually introduced these various ceremonies. But one of the problems for me about practicing in Japan is that it's all in Japanese and I don't always know what's going on. And so for me, this part of the great value of these Jukai-es and all these things that the Japanese are offering for us is that it's getting translated into English and explained what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
And I've started reading this set of books called the Kyoju Kaimon, which you probably have. No, not the Kyoju Kaimon, the books the Soto Shu books that tell you about all the different ceremonies. And
Right.
I can't remember, is that not the Kyoju?
I don't know what it's called, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, so anyway, I recently started reading it, and it just has a lot more meaning to me now than when it was given to me like 15 or 20 years ago at one of these meetings, but I never read it. But it's just been sitting on. So anyway, it's interesting how it's kind of seeped back into my life, but I feel like, and another thing I wanted to say, you used the word choreography. And of course, as you know, I studied a fair amount of dance and also taught dance. And I think that's the way I really think about that Jukai-e is like a giant piece of choreography. And, you know, even the Ryoban, there were 12 of us, even getting us to all move together and do the same thing was challenging, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then to kind of get the whole group, the whole thing pulled together, there was 180 people there participating in that. And I remember when I saw an opera called Eido once, and there were 150 people moving on stage at one time. And I thought that piece of choreography was the most amazing thing. But you know, this Jukai-e was pretty close.
Yes.
And you know, when you dance with people, you move together with them. You have to make it all one dance. You can't each be going your own direction. Well, that could be a different kind of dance. But
Right. Yeah.
well, thank you. You said a lot of things that really resonated for me.
And I too started and have come to the point of realizing that Zazen is the core, and and all these other things are, like I said, actually unnecessary. But everybody has their bottom line, and I found mine when I found, like your students did, when there was no organization. It was a little chaotic. And it's hard to imagine using the word chaotic for people just entering and exiting the Zendo, but that's the way it felt to me. This is chaotic. What do I do?
Yeah, there's this question of what do I do? It's a feeling of being disconnected.
Right. And
Yeah.
it was not a good feeling. And then I realized, oh, well, I guess I need a little bit of form. I guess I value it a little bit.
Yeah.
I come from a Christian background where it was very, very lacking in, you might say, ritual. But what I like is the opportunity I was given as to be a doan, to do the bells and light the candles and do the different things. We had some extra people at our Thursday night Zazen sessions this week, and I had this strong feeling as though what I did set the mood and the tempo for them, that I was doing it as precisely as I could just to give them that feeling, that sense of the order, I guess it was, that they were all connected with what we were doing. And I don't think I ever really appreciated ritual before. So that was an interesting feeling that I had the other night.
I can understand that. So I love bells and drums and things, but also you are setting the tone in the way that you ring the bell, and people can feel that. I mean, it's really profound, actually. And I definitely wouldn't want to eliminate bells. I mean, that's the other thing, like, wow, bells. So just a little anecdote about bells. I love bells so much that I officiated at my son's wedding in October, and I did it as a Buddhist priest. I mean, I wore the regalia and everything, but it wasn't a Buddhist wedding, except for a couple things. I had borrowed a really nice bell, which I used for the time when people were gathering before the ceremony, and this was just a beautiful bell. And so for 10 to 20 minutes before the ceremony, I rang this bell every 30 seconds or something. And people didn't need to understand what it meant or anything. All they needed to do was experience it, and they loved it. I mean, the other thing I did was I offered incense. I didn't explain that either, but people sometimes, they didn't need to understand why they loved it, but they loved it. And they were somehow brought them into the space in a, I don't know, I wouldn't say reverential, but solemn, not solemn, but respectful, calming, very calming. So there's all this chit chat going on, before, and then this bell starts ringing, and people start kind of, settling down. And it was beautiful. And people who had no inkling about anything about Zen or bells thought it was quite beautiful. And so some of these things almost have their intrinsic value that we don't even realize until we experience it. And bells are wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, your whole life is kind of ruled by bells when you're in the monastery. It's like you hear a bell and it means you do this, and you hear something else and it means you do that.
Right.
And it's like, you don't even realize how much of a rhythm it keeps in your life. When I was ringing the big old bone show one time, we each had different jobs, that rotated every 4 or 5 days. And my job was to ring the old bone show, the big bell, that's as big as a room that you hit, you ring it with a log in the morning and also in the evening, and I remember I was having tea with the teacher, with the Roshi there and some other people. And it was time to ring the bell, and I was having tea, but what happened is there's another monastery that was just a couple rice paddies away from us, where, several people, Meredith and Priscilla and Gendo and various people from here participated. And they rang bells at the same time, but they're a little offset. And they harmonized too, but theirs would come first, and then a few seconds later, ours would come. And I heard their bell go. And I was like, bye, gotta go, And I was out there practically in time to ring the bell on cue, That much, it just draws you. You don't, like you say, you don't have to think about it. You hear the bell and you hear the drum and you say, oh, it's work period. Or you hear the Han and you say, oh, it's the end of work period, I mean, depending on how you do it. But yeah, I love that instrumentation too. It's sort of kind of like the song behind the dance,
Yes. Yes.
the music,
Yes. Mm-hmm. Speaking of bells, I don't know if you know Mark Anderson. He's a Buddhist who lives in this area where I live, and he's a percussionist, primarily a drummer. And he has started this practice where he invites people to what he calls a sound bath. Now, I haven't done this yet. I'm going to on the solstice, but basically people just sit or lie down or whatever, relax and listen to him ring bells of various kinds for, I don't know how long, at least 30 minutes. And it's a sound bath. Anyway, it sounds, people who have experienced it, very a lovely experience. And this is part of his practice now, that he has these sessions and invites people to his sound bath. And that's all it is. It's just sound.
We have sort of a sound bath here right now with the
Yeah.
birds.
Ah.
The birds, they're so happy. Especially when I put out bird food for them.
Oh, I suppose, yes.
There's so many different kinds of birds here, and there's so many different kinds of sounds. And somebody just showed me this app, which I now have, which you can just push the button and it tells you which bird it is.
Wow. So
Yeah.
what are the birds that you have there?
Well, lots of cardinals.
Mm-hmm.
But one of my favorites that we have in this particular area, I don't know, you have these over at your house, Lorna, they're indigo buntings. I don't know. We're pretty close to the river, but so she's on the other side. So I don't know why we have indigo buntings, but they're these beautiful blue birds and we have crows and wrens and chickadees. The chickadees made a nest in one of our beams and she had two batches of little ones. We were avoiding the front door for a while because she was busy with her babies and her eggs,
So Teijo, I have a question for you, back to the Jukai-e. So if you had come to this kind of simplified version that, we only need this and that because Zazen is the core practice, how did you feel in anticipation and participation in that intense ceremonies day after day?
Well, I did the last one.
Yes, I'm sorry I missed that. Yes.
It was in, no, I did the last one like 15 years ago.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, okay.
And it was all in, it was in Japanese, but we had translation. Eido translated at that time for us. You know, there was, it had long Japanese explanations and then long translations. And then, you know, so there was a lot of that and it was very exhausting. And Chosen and I were in the same, I think we were in the Ryoban. I don't know what it was, but we had like 10 o'clock at night rehearsals every single night. And it was very intense, but I came out of that. And when Chimyo said to me that she had applied, you know, she was on the committee for planning that. They took her to France, they did it in France, and then they were going to do it in Japan, but they couldn't because of COVID. When she applied for that group, for that, when she was talking about applying for the committee, I said, yes, it's absolutely an amazing experience, you know, and I couldn't even explain what about it. I mean, some things I have copious notes from it, but yeah, it just, so I was very excited about doing it. And it was a little challenging for me to be in a Ryoban full of Americans though, because I'm so used to being in Ryobans with Japanese and I just watch what they do and do what they do. But I realized pretty quickly that it was in my body because I've been going to those meetings since 1997 and I've been in Ryobans every single time I go to a meeting.
Oh,
I mean, everybody's in the Ryoban at the meetings. This was a special thing where they had a particular group,
right.
but usually it's just time to do a ceremony. Everybody go up on the altar and, you know, so it was kind of in my body and I actually reading the book confused me. So
I can understand that. Almost too much detail.
Detailed, yeah. But I'm very interested in, you know, I'm going out to Bloomington next weekend for the 20th anniversary of Sanshinji Shohaku's group. And also he's stepping down. I think this is all happening the same weekend. And I think Hoko told me they were going to do mountain seat ceremony. So I said, what's going to be in it? Because Shohaku is so like not into ceremonies and he didn't even really study ceremonies. He used to ask me how to do them, you know, because he's just not interested at all. And I said, well, what are you going to do? And she says, I don't know, but you can be sure that it's going to be bare bones. And I said, I want to know about that because I want to do our ceremony as simply as possible, that we're going to have one here in a couple of years.
Oh,
in 2025. So I'm going to tell Chimyo, I hope I think it's going to get streamed. I hope it gets streamed.
I think so. I'm
going to had a pretty good technical setup there. So
yeah,
you might be interested in tuning in on some of that too, Lorna and Kalyan.
I'm going to be there also.
Oh, you're going to be there. Yeah. I thought you might come. Yeah. So yeah, I'm real curious to see how far you can hone it down and still have it be acceptable by the headquarters in Japan. Because Chico wants us to be accepted by the headquarters in Japan. I said, it doesn't matter. Let's just do whatever ceremony we want. She said, no, she really wanted to do it. She got everybody together. Lorna was probably in on this and had, and they sewed a 25-row okesa for this, which you don't even have to have, but it's a traditional thing and she wanted to do it. And so even Tomoe-san has some stitches in it. I brought it out to Minnesota and had people stitching it out there. And
wow.
So it'll be nice. It'll be our 20th anniversary of Great Tree moving into this place.
And what are you calling the ceremony that you're having?
Mountain seat or Shinzai.
Okay. So I'm curious why you haven't done that before.
Because we didn't have enough money.
Oh.
I went to Diane San's and it cost her like $20,000 and that was like 15 years ago. And I was like, first of all, I know it doesn't have to cost us that much because we don't have to bring in nuns from Japan and things. But when I realized that we were having so much trouble paying our mortgage.
Oh, yeah.
Now we've got our mortgage paid, but Chimio was after me, and I didn't think it was necessary, but now I see it's important if, when I pass it on, to have some marker,
Right.
I'm kind of saying this is the person who is now moving into this. And I've been watching, they just changed abbesses or prioresses at the convent where I used to be. So I watched the ceremony of transition. They change every 6 years, and they're elected by the community. I hope Great Tree can morph into that. I think the Benedictine way really of electing the prioress or the prior and changing it every 6 years, they can be reelected. But in fact, this one that just got, this is her second term, but she missed a term. And then the other thing is the prioress, the previous prioress has to leave for a year.
Oh, my goodness.
In order to give the new prioress,
Wow. That's interesting. So the Poor Clares did something similar. They had terms for the abbess. I think it was 6 years, but the previous one did not have to leave.
Yeah, well, they didn't used to do that. That's a new thing. But anyway, I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. And what they said is this is an opportunity for her to do it her way without feeling like she's under the.
Well, yes, that's understandable. But where does that person go who goes away for a
Well,
year?
she's going to go. They said, where are you going to go? And she says, I'm going to go stay with my sister.
Oh.
So that's nice for her too, because it's a very intense thing to be in that position of leadership. And even now there's only about 70 nuns left, but 70 nuns is a lot. And it's a big responsibility. It's both administrative and a spiritual leadership.
Mhm.
It's been interesting because in the past they've always had the elections, just everybody vote for whoever you want, and there's no,
Oh,
but there's no nominations or anything. And then the five highest get the five highest votes. Those are the ones that are voted on for the final thing.
interesting.
They've changed it now, and they actually have people that they sort of nominate, and people who have specific skills that they think are needed, which I don't know. I think I prefer the other one better, but they live the life and I don't, so I can't be too critical, But I've learned a lot. I just was out there visiting. It's out in South Dakota, and so I kind of got the scoop on what's going on, and I can watch everything on YouTube, on Facebook. So
Great.
anyway, I think you asked a question about 15 minutes ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
So
okay.
anyway, I went into it. I love ritual, and to be honest with you, I was really glad that I was in the Ryoban, because I've always felt like prostrations are like morning exercise, and we got lots of exercise because we did lots of prostrations.
I
But
actually couldn't do them, but because
I too am 76, so I don't know how many more years I'm going to be able to do this.
so
I was
I'm
exhausted.
missing part of a lung. So part of my problem with those things is the respiratory challenge.
Oh, yeah.
And so I did standing bows.
Yeah. Well, I won't go into this, but I wore too many clothes one day because it was kind of cold in the mornings. And when we did those like 40 prostrations in a row, I thought I was going to pass out. So that was the rehearsal. After that, I just didn't wear as many clothes or didn't do that ceremony.
So that brings up another thing about these, and that is sort of being aware of our own limitations and respecting them. So I have a lot of limitations now. And when we did that, one thing I didn't anticipate was that prolonged standing was going to cause some problems with back pain and knee pain. Because what's the problem with standing? Well, standing many hours, day after day after day, turned out to be a challenge. and with anything that's you have to think about, at what point do you say it's too, not good for me to be doing this? So now, for instance, I can't sit very easily on a cushion, but if I sit in a chair all day for session, my legs swell up. So, I mean, there are limitations.
Yes, yes, there are. And I think that's, I think it's really good for Americans are much more aware of this than Japanese, although we're pretty driven, but they just don't think they should have limitations and
Right.
push through. And it's just not my way of thinking. I just feel like, from the beginning, I said, I don't want to stop sitting for the rest of my life, and even as I'm getting older, I have these physical limitations and, I feel like in order to keep sitting for the rest of my life, I'm going to have to honor my moments when I need more rest or I need,
Mhm.
so finding that balance, it's like, it's a constant thing to find the middle way
Right.
with everything. So, but I mean, I got into Zen, Zazen because I wanted a body mind practice. I was doing Tai Chi before that, but all my friends were doing this. I don't remember what it was called, but you could just sit any way you wanted to. It was a certain kind of meditation that was very popular in the 70s.
Not
Transcendental. What?
Not TM.
TM, yeah.
Okay.
And they were just relaxing in their seats and stuff like that. And I thought, I just feel like I don't want to have to go to dance classes to deal with my body and then go to a spiritual place to deal with my spirit. I want it all to be one. So I was very attracted to Zazen for that reason. And actually, the first time I ever did a prostration, I thought, oh, good, this is good exercise. I wasn't so into all the devotional stuff anymore. So I think our time is very close now. So I'm sorry I can't. Oh, look at the kitty.
Yeah, this is Zelda.
Who?
Zelda.
Zelda. Thank you very much. Thank you. This was really very nice. May the merit of this practice benefit all beings and bring peace. Thank you.